All right, let's learn about error handling in Rust. So in programming, there are recoverable errors. That means errors which do not cause the program to fail, right? So when you're running a program and you're eating some popcorn, or you're just running a program and something happens, like you upload the wrong file, you could get a message that says the file type you specified is incorrect. The program doesn't fail, right? So you can fix that error and it continues. Now, there's another type of error, unrecoverable. And those errors essentially cause the program to fail. And that can happen, let's say, if it's not the most robust type of coding, and let's say for some reason the program tries to access locations outside of a data structure, say an array. All right, that would cause a program to fail. So what would happen there is then the program would terminate immediately and provide feedback to the caller of the program, saying like error, blah 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 blah. Okay. So when it comes to unrecoverable errors, there is a macro called the panic macro in Rust. So the macro is the perfect way to assert conditions, basically. And when you call the macro, what it does is it's going to fail the program in those conditions. And it's closely tied with the unwrap method. All right, so the unwrap method calls the panic macro. And what unwrap does is basically it's going to check whether something is true, condition, or an error with the ERR, right? So it's okay, it checks with this okay, or it checks with this error. It's a function basically that's checking, or a method as part of the error structures. And it raises a panic with the contents of the error being displayed. And another error function to note is expect. And expect does the same thing as unwrap with the panic, except in addition, you can add an expectation, meaning you can custom a message before panicking in addition to the contents of the error. So you'll get like this error message as we're about to see, but with expect you can also customize further. All right. So that's how error handling works in Rust. Let's take a look at some examples, right? I'm gonna have a sip of some delicious coffee. I'm drinking some fantastic coffee this morning. Okay, so you know what? Let's just start with looking at this panic. So we're gonna do a function. And we're going to get deep in this panic. All right, so don't panic in real life. It's just a macro. So you bring in the panic method by writing in panic like this, an exclamation mark, and then you can add a message. So I can say, this will cause the program to abruptly end. Okay? And let's say in our program underneath panic, we had this print message, right? So we had the program is working here, all right? So if I were to run this code, let's hit the run button, go for a little code jog, and we scroll down, we're gonna see that, it's kind of hard to see here, let me move this output over here so you can see it better. So we're going to see that at the line 30, panic, this will cause the program to abruptly end. Notice on line 31, so here's 30 and 31, right? 30 is the panic code, 31 is the print. Notice on 31 we say that there's an unreachable statement. And notice in the standard output there is no output because panic is causing the program to end. So this statement means, when they say unreachable, it just means that never got executed. The program ended. If I were to comment out panic and I run the code again, we see that the program is working. All right, so that's what panic does. All right, so hopefully that's nice and clear. Now, bearing that in mind, let me show you how the unwrap or expect would work. Right. So let's say, for example, that in our program, what we wanted to do is bring in a file. When we want to import modules or files or whatever it is, we use the use statement. So we say use, and let's say we had the standard through a file system for a specific file. Now, of course, this file doesn't exist, so the program's going to fail. I'm just making this file up for the purposes of this demonstration. But let's just say that we're bringing in this file, this non-existent file, and we're setting a variable, we can call it f, to equal the file, and we're trying to open the file. So we're saying open, and the open function would basically open up the file, and we would be able to put in the name, but the file doesn't exist. But let's say the file was called, I don't know, does not exist.txt. Well, we could use the unwrap, or we could use the expect. I could say .expect and actually input a message here. no such thing, all right? Because there's no such thing. Okay, now we could have our program here. You know what, I'll just move this code now. I'll copy this code over and I'll just move it above the print, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and run this code and see what happens. So I'm gonna run this code and we're gonna see here, and we see here that we have panicked at the bottom and we see no such thing. That's our error message. That's what I just wrote explicitly. Now the error that we're gonna get returned from the program is even gonna be quite similar. It's gonna say no such file or directory. So we get that as well. But in addition, we customize with expect this no such thing. I could actually even change expect to unwrap to show you, and we wouldn't be able to run our message, but we could just close and run the function. And if we ran it like this, we're just going to get here an error value, same thing, no such file or directory. So we know Rust is smart. Rust is like, wait a minute, that doesn't exist. We're panicking. So that panic macro gets called. You know, it's not actually being called. I commented it out. But unwrap will do that if there's the error, if there's an error. If there's no error, it's fine. But if there's an error, it's going to do that. All right? And expect as well. So I switch it back to expect. And there you go. You know, in a nutshell, this is the logic and the important macro and the important match type principles behind error handling in Rust. And just so you know, this error, when we see ERR, what is that? That's an enum, by the way. Remember enums? So if you're not sure, go back to the other section. But we have the OK and we have the error. And I imagine you would intuitively be able to guess which one means the program's going to be OK and which one's going to throw an error. So these actually are also part of the matching when it's checking to see with expect. But instead of having to write that every time, we very conveniently have error handling functionality. All right, so let's stop there and then let's move on to an exercise in error handling, test you out on a few other skills and move forward from there. All right, see you for the exercise.